Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to wherever you're tuning in around the world for this latest Reuters Events webinar, where we'll be discussing a very timely topic, last mile delivery. We'll be talking about the challenges and opportunities presented in this fascinating segment of logistics. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce each of the panelists, starting off with Erik. Erik, could you please introduce yourself and your organization to the audience, please?
Thanks, Nick. Hi, I'm Erik Caldwell. I'm the president of our last mile delivery business. XPO is ranked by Fortune magazine and Forbes magazine as the top logistics company. So we're very proud of what we do. And specifically, we're leaders in the space of offering supply chain solutions to our customers. A bit of my background, I was a captain in the US Army. I've had a chance to consult at McKinsey Company. I've run supply chain for 2 large companies and had the chance to join XPO Logistics about 4 years ago. First as the chief operating officer in our contract logistics supply chain business, and then more recently, about 1.5 years ago, as president of our last mile business.
Excellent. Appreciate you joining us, Erik. And next up, Ashley, if you can do the same, introduce yourself and your organization, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Yentz. I work for an organization called Sleep Number. Our mission is really to improve the lives of our customers by individualizing sleep and really being able to deliver an unparalleled sleep experience. A little bit about me, I am the Senior Director of Continuous Improvement. I work mostly in the end-to-end fulfillment space, really looking to optimize our fulfillment to our end customer so we can start improving their lives with great sleep. Prior to Sleep Number, I operated as a vice president at a third-party logistics company, working for multiple retailers and manufacturers. And then before that, I worked in both Toyota and Hilti's supply chain, mostly in the last mile space.
Excellent. Appreciate you joining us, Ashley. And next up, Sarah, if you can do the same, introduce yourself and your organization.
Hi, hello everybody. My name is Sarah Banks. I am with Accenture. We're a very large global professional services firm. I have about over 600,000 employees globally, really working with companies on broad-based problems to help develop good solutions. My sector, in fact, actually is the freight and logistics segment. So I lead our practice that works with logistics companies specific to the challenges that they're trying to face and address. And so, yeah, within that practice, of course, is our last mile capability where we do address issues in the supply chain for these clients to be able to address that challenge. So thank you very much.
Appreciate you joining us, Sarah. And last but not least, Scott, if you can introduce yourself and your organization, please.
Hello, everyone. Scott Spitler from FarEye. First off, thanks, Nick and Reuters, for putting on a great event today. I am with FarEye. We are a software-based SaaS that is enabling logistics companies to be more agile, sustainable through our platform, and we enable last mile execution as well as some visibility. So a little bit of background on myself. I am a supply chain professional with about 17, 18 years of experience. I have worked across many organizations, including DHL, many 3PLs, and Chiquita Banana was my original start. So working in the supply chain around produce. So very excited to be here with everyone, and thank you for joining.
Excellent. Appreciate you joining us, Scott. To start off with, Sarah, if we can come to you, just starting holistically, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges currently presented for last mile delivery specifically?
Well, I think honestly that the biggest challenge that the industry is seeing is in capacity. I mean, there is a huge challenge in just getting access to the fulfillment capabilities. Actually, let's even go back and let's look at inventory, right? I mean, we've got a huge focus on where is the inventory right now, a lot of focus on the west coast of the US in the Los Angeles port area. You look out with binoculars at sea, that's really where the problem really starts, I think, profoundly, especially for a US based consumer. But from that, I mean, the challenge really has a ripple effect in terms of what are the access points for inventory to flow? How will it come in? Where will it be stored? And ultimately, how does that get into the hands of the end consumer from a last mile? There's a lot of orchestration that's required, I think, for last mile to be successful. And therein lies, I think, probably the biggest challenge that we've got out there today.
Excellent. Erik, do you have any thoughts there to what Sarah mentioned?
I completely agree with what Sarah said. I think every company is seeing the real environment of inflation and tight capacity around delivery teams and labor. And I think that's all our focus right now. The supply chain disruptions are also real. I think this is an unprecedented time, to use that common phrase, the last year and a half, where CEOs are probably spending more time with their supply chain professionals and leaders than they are with marketing. This has probably never happened before and will probably continue for at least a few more quarters, that everyone's focused on supply chain. People at home are focused on supply chain, and it's our job to help solve those problems for our customers and our companies. The other thing I say that's changed a lot right now is just a level of collaboration that we're seeing between logistics providers and our customers. Peak planning is at a level of detail by site, by time that we've never seen before. The real-time visibility of product supply is all changed. And I think that's the key there. And we've tried to really develop a number of tools with our smart labor planning and forecasting tools to understand how much delivery capacity, how many dock doors, how much space, how much labor is needed well in advance, so we can get there early for our customers and for the in-state consumer. And also really around how do you route more effectively, knowing that there's a strong constraint around delivery capacity. Every half a stop matters. Every stop is critical. So how do you prevent stops from falling off with reschedules? And then how do you get more stops on the truck within the same amount of time?
Definitely. Ashley, obviously, Sarah and Erik touched on a lot of great points there. Do you have any comments to add on some of the challenges that you're currently seeing in the market?
Yeah, I'll maybe add as an input, right, as we talk about capacity, and Erik touched on eliminating those reschedules, essentially putting pressure on those reschedules so that our stop goes as planned. That's really important when we talk about our labor and our driver experience, especially in kind of the industry that I'm in, if you're thinking about bulk type of deliveries. And what I would just say is that becomes really critical, that as we're looking at the end-to-end fulfillment, that we're making sure that that delivery happens on time, and that we don't have our drivers have large peaks and valleys in their work. We want to give them reliable work, consistency in their work, so they stick around. Kind of another challenge in our industry is really built around a couple big sales events, which means we have very high peaks and very low peaks. So we have to talk about how do we build flexibility within our capacity when it's not stable execution of that capacity.
Definitely great points there about scaling up and scaling down. Scott, just from your perspective, what are some of the challenges that you're currently seeing in last mile delivery?
Yeah, I mean, and everyone has mentioned the high level ones, right? I would take something that Erik said a little bit further, this collaboration in the supply chain, right? Collaboration, everyone has a bunch of data behind them, right? And this is, being a collaborative supply chain organization and sharing that data with each other to be able to ensure the shipments make it on time, as Ashley had mentioned. So, we work, I think one of the biggest things is being able to take this data and making it actionable in the field, right? Regardless if you're delivering last mile or you're having, delays in shipments overseas, et cetera, right? It's mitigating that, right? And mitigating the customer expectations at the end of the day to say, hey, we're being proactive rather than reactive. And this data is helping us to be that. And I think, the expectations of end consumers is that they know exactly every step of the way, regardless if they're buying a refrigerator or they're buying a widget off of Amazon, right? So from our perspective, right, those are the end consumer is wanting that visibility and wanting to understand every step of the journey, and getting that in their hands is one of the biggest things for us. So
definitely. So Sarah, just bringing yourself in, obviously we've been in a global pandemic for a long time now. It's hard to imagine really how long it's been. And there's kind of maybe no excuse for some organizations that this is a surprise. So how are you seeing organizations adapt their last mile delivery in light of some of the challenges that we've seen over kind of the last almost 2 years now?
I think the biggest adaptation actually goes back to an earlier point around inventory placement. So, and there's huge investments happening out there by companies that have got supply chains to run, and looking at where their inventory is housed to be able to better respond to the last mile demand that's happening. So one piece of it, I think, is the inventory, but along with the inventory comes the data. Trying to understand better where the demand is going to come from, trying to anticipate what products will sell, how much of that product I need to hold, how can I adapt my delivery capability to get that product moved from a last mile perspective. again, goes back to the earlier theme around orchestration. I think there's a lot of moves that have happened. I mean, in fact, I think, one of the points I'm sure that we'll all talk about is sustainability, because it's such a big topic right now. But this shift that has happened because of the pandemic and the boom of e-commerce and the more localized placement of inventory, while it's complex, very difficult to do, it has some benefits, right? In fact, research we've done actually have shown that it's contributed to a net reduction in CO2 emissions because of some of these moves companies have made to be able to respond to the conditions brought about in the pandemic. I mean, last mile's never been more important. And I think it's nice to see that the importance it can have actually goes beyond just getting goods into customers' hands, but actually could be green as well.
Great points. Ashley, just from your perspective, how have you seen, I guess, the adaptation given the challenges over the last kind of 18 months?
Yeah, thank you. And I think what's interesting, where we're going from a fulfillment perspective, we've kind of changed our thinking a little bit. It's not if there will be a disruption, it's just when will the next one be? So we will just consistently, as a fulfillment, be disrupted, whether it be labor, COVID, port delays, something. So what we've started to challenge amongst our end-to-end delivery and to really focused on that driver experience at the end. The driver is kind of our end customer when you think about the supply chain. What we've started to focus on is this kind of word of flexibility. So not only building flexibility in our labor resources in the driver experience, but also flexibility in that inventory flow. So being able to see sooner when we have a disruption and being able to modify our plan based on that disruption. For example, if you're in the St. Louis market and we would normally fulfill your smart bed out of Texas, if there's a disruption that happens in that market, we might change, we may be able to shift quickly and deliver that smart bed to you out of our Ohio facility. So we call that a little bit of the triangle offense, which I think was a very unsuccessful offense in sports. So I don't like to reference that too much, but it's all about building that visibility. I think we talked a little bit about visibility, data availability, and then being able to augment our plans. So again, that smart bed gets delivered when we expect it to. And if it doesn't, we're doing something about it, or we're communicating sooner to our teams so that we can effectively utilize that labor and keep them busy and focused on delighting the customer.
Definitely. So obviously there's been a lot of innovation in this area of logistics. So just Erik, just from your perspective, can you just discuss some of the technologies and innovations that you're seeing deliver the greatest value to XPO when it comes to last mile operations?
Yeah, so I think, looking back, I entered the last mile space about 20 years ago. I left the US Army and went to work at a big multinational company, same one that Scott was at. And just the number of phone calls that you would hear within the sites. All the scheduling was done via phone and voicemail. Most of it was paper-based tickets. And dispatch, if everyone will remember, dispatch was done on two-way radios. So you constantly had the click of the Nextels going on in the background. When you walk in the hubs now, they're incredibly quiet because most of this is being done online and being done very seamlessly from a customer service standpoint. Dispatch is incredibly quiet. The drivers are using their handhelds to provide updates. For every stop, every delivery, they're scanning everything within the warehouse, scanning it onto the truck, scanning it into the customer's home, and automatically taking photos of that delivery piece in place. And that's going back. So dispatch has real-time updates to that. The other really cool thing is we geofence our deliveries within our own proprietary software, so customers can get a notification 30 minutes ahead of time based on where the driver is located, the average transit time, and the delivery location. So all this is automated and streamlined. And in the olden days, 20 years ago, we used to give everyone a paper survey. Well, that happens online now. So text notification, text surveys, and we're getting a lot more information and feedback from our consumers in order to continue to improve the process and make it better. So I think that's the biggest difference to me. It's just how quiet it is out there and how the service levels have changed tremendously.
Definitely. Scott, do you have any points to add to what Erik mentioned there?
Yeah, I would really double click on some of that Erik said earlier around orchestration, right? I think orchestration is the backbone of what's happening, whether that is orchestration changes because of COVID or because of a new customer, whatever that orchestration, and being able to be agile behind your supply chain I think that's one of the biggest things, and the technology is helping companies to be is to be that, not the roadblock anymore, but the enabler of, hey, we can help you to do this, right? So logistics companies are using software and technology to be able to, as Erik mentioned, right? You trigger automatic notifications to consumers, right? When you're next in line, right? We've all seen it, right? It's very prevalent in very big retailers, right? So you're getting more data up front, right? And that it is, the technology is enabling that data to be in the hands of the people that I mentioned, right? So I mentioned it earlier, but getting that data in the right people's hands, rather than this siloed effect that supply chain used to be, that you work out of an OMS or a WMS and everything is housed there, right? That's where it's at. Now it's being connected through APIs, and this automatic messaging. You are able to get all the information, and if you want, you can analyze that and make changes to your business, as Erik mentioned, around NPS and consumer feedback, right? Consumers are louder than they've ever been in their entire life, right? And we talk about your brand loyalty, right, can be affected at the end of the day by a bad delivery experience, right? One bad delivery experience can, ultimately, they tell 10 people about their bad delivery experience, right? And it just waterfalls. So, the end consumer's voice is louder than ever, and it has to be listened to at this point in the supply chain, right? Because you can either, make or break you if you decide to, ignore that end consumer and what they're trying to tell you.
Great point. So just delving a little bit deeper into that, obviously, not everybody on this call or even watching this call is based in urban environments. Some of them are based in kind of more rural environments, but they still want, Ashley to send them a bed, and they still want their products delivered as well. Starting off with Sarah, what technologies and what strategies can we use to drive down the cost of rural last mile delivery specifically?
I think the core of getting to answer that question, it's difficult, right? So there's a lot of cost involved in getting to rural locations, a lot of service issues in getting to rural locations. When you look at how to solve for that, I think there's a lens of partnership along with a lens of data and technology. So on the partnership side, there are, I think you've seen in the market, partnerships with maybe brick and mortar entities where transportation companies can partner with retail footprints that are actually closer to the rural customer, and taking advantage of those outlets as being a fulfillment node, a local fulfillment node for package delivery. But I also think on the maybe tapping into partnership and going over in the data technology side, and it may require a regulatory push, dare I say, but actually having competitors collaborate better on how to get to those destinations. These are destinations that have demand, but the demand is not consistent. It's not regular. Ashley talked about the point of trying to smooth out those curves. And in order to do that level of service in the rural community, you need to try to find a way to bring smoothness. You need to find a way to build up density. And doing that maybe require partnership, sharing data about delivery, sharing data about where the demand is coming from, and even sharing assets about how to deliver. And we can get into things like drones and other ways to solve for it with technology, but I think there's likely paths there through the first two examples versus introducing an example like a drone, which I think does have a place for that kind of delivery. But I think just the scale of how it can cover and the management of that is a little bit more complex than bringing players together to get the rural last mile solved.
Definitely. Ashley, do you have any points to add there on rural last mile delivery?
Yeah, I really agree with Sarah in the sense that there's only so much volume in those areas. So what we've done is we've built an optimization strategy all the way up into where we manufacture the bed to deliver into those areas at a very specific time. So you're not eroding your miles on your trucks driven on a regular basis. We have clear times and routes that we're going into those areas very purposely. Our intention isn't necessarily to deliver every day into those kind of lower volume areas. I think Sarah brings up a great point about partnerships and visibility to volume. Utilizing technology where we could share assets and go into those areas more frequently would be highly beneficial. For someone like us who we do most of our home delivery, we do most of our white glove delivery for our smart beds. We would potentially look at outsourcing that part of our supply chain to partners that could leverage that volume and get their assets better utilized into those areas.
Definitely. Scott, do you have any other perspectives to what Ashley and Sarah mentioned there about a rural last mile delivery?
Yeah, I think rural last mile delivery is going to take some collaboration, right? You've seen collaboration, right? I mean, logistics companies that have the assets, right? The underutilized assets, right? Depending on what you're delivering, right? I think Ashley's supply chain strategy with big and bulky is a little bit different than, you know, a small parcel final mile, right? Because if you're dealing with small parcel, right, you can work share partner with the USPS, right? That's a known process, right? But when you're out there with a big and bulky and a bed, right, and you need, you know, people that can lift it and install it, right? That's different than somebody dropping off at your doorstep. So you really have to think about your strategy, right? You know, your economics around going into there, understanding how much it costs you, right? You have to dig into, you know, the analytics behind it to say, hey, this is going to cost me so and so, right? And whether that gets passed on or we figure out a different technique, right? There's a more strategy that goes into rural delivery, in my opinion, when you deal with big and bulky. But you know, the technology piece plays a little bit of a role in that to enable that. You know, if I'm in rural Kansas buying a bed and I'm on the website and that experience, right, it's you know, if I can tap into carrier capacity that knows that, hey, the most optimal delivery for me as a company is to deliver on Mondays in this area, right? We only provide, you know, delivery options on every Monday to those customers, right? It's a balancing act between cost of making that delivery and ensuring the consumer happiness on speed, et cetera, right? And that's the, you know, I think we talk about rural versus metropolis areas, right? I think expectations are a little bit different in rural areas, right? You know, you get, you know, metropolises, you think I saw 15 to 20 minute grocery deliveries now, right? If you're in downtown Chicago, right? I'm from rural Ohio. I don't know that I would ever be like, I need something in 15 to 20 minutes that I can't drive, you know, to my local grocery store a mile down the road, right? There's different applications to all these things. So yeah, it's interesting. It's strategic in nature. So yeah.
Great points. Yeah, I think some of my friends in London expect avocados delivered to them in 15 minutes, which I think maybe is more of an issue with them rather than the logistics networks. Erik, just from your perspective, Ashley made some great points earlier about drivers. I'd love to understand your perspective on what technologies and strategies that you're using there to make their jobs as easy as possible.
Yeah, I want to recognize the carriers, the delivery teams out there first, because, you know, Ashley said it up front, like this is the most important component to the delivery and it's their interaction with the consumer. So anything we can do to make that experience better and make the delivery teams happier, that's always a very positive thing. And they're truly small American businesses that want to grow and scale and they want to do well. There's no doubt about that. I think part of it's around the visibility. So they have complete visibility to everything that's happening. They have complete visibility to upstream and other product, other orders. And that we can tie that to the driver, to the hub, and also back to the customer. And then the consumer can see all that too, because all points of interest have complete visibility to that order. The other piece is around how do you make their job easier, right? So how do you leverage your dispatch capabilities so if there is an escalation, if something is wrong, that they can instantly call and know that they have help and then they're not alone. And I think that's a lot of it. It's really the technology allows us to see that, to anticipate it, and allow us to escalate if something went sideways. You know, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, you definitely want to resolve it as quickly as possible. And a lot of times that delivery team is not in the best position to solve that. It's the dispatch and it's us working with our customers to figure out what's the next step for that consumer.
Perfect. Ashley, just from your perspective, to Erik's point there, how do you focus there on the driver and make the driver's experiences as easy as possible?
Yeah, like Erik mentioned, the driver to us is a really pivotal part of our customer experience. We referenced our NPS scores, excuse me, and really wowing our customer off the bat with that delivery. Something that we've had to modify at Sleep Number to really, one, make the driver experience the best experience and also free up time for them with our customer in their home to deliver that new smart bed and sleep experience, spend more time with them getting comfortable with our bed, with our product, which in turn should reduce our returns coming back the other way. something that we've had to do is completely modify the way that we actually distribute our product. About 2 years ago, we used to be a bed in a box where we were actually assembling your bed in your home. And we've taken all of that complexity out for the driver. So now we're a fully assembled bed, meaning we're manufacturing the bed and distributing in kind of fully equipped into your home, which just frees up more time for the driver to build that experience with the customer, as well as it grows our capacity. We have less time per stop, which hopefully helps our drivers execute more revenue on behalf of the company. The other things we are looking into is, and Erik kind of mentioned this, but with our smart bed, we have components, right? We have service parts. If we get into a home and we find that there was a defect, we've armed our drivers with spot kits to be able to assess very quickly and again get our customer sleeping on that bed for a beautiful first night's sleep. So we're trying to again make their lives easier, give them the tools and technology so that they can deliver a great experience to our customer.
Definitely. Sarah, I'd love to hear your perspective on this too.
I mean, I think what Erik and Ashley are really highlighting here is just how critical the driver is to customer experience. And I honestly think that's a mind-blowing notion to people who look at supply chains and try to figure out the most important components. And I think when we look at what's going to evolve around the technology, I think there is definitely a component here to get drivers into more flexible work arrangements, safer work arrangements. You even see some of the evolution in the EV space, the electric vehicle space. If you look at some of the prototypes coming out, you can see that they're putting driver experience at the center in terms of ergonomics in the vehicle, where the cargo will be loaded in the back, how to get that retrieved safely, maybe without as much physical effort as what is required today, which I love in Ashley's example, right, was really about trying to take the bed process out of the hand of the driver. There is going to be so much money spent on this segment of transforming last mile than I think in any other than maybe the vehicles themselves as an example, because without drivers wanting to be drivers, nothing works. And so it's just really fascinating to hear the examples by Erik and Ashley, just bringing it to life. But I think we're at a tipping point where we will see spend and investment to even bring new technology and greater benefits to drivers than we've ever seen before.
Great points there. Scott, I'd love to hear your thoughts here. Obviously, Erik and Sarah and Ashley have all mentioned great points here. We all know about the driver shortage that's going on around the world. Be interesting to hear what you think about this challenge.
Yeah, I think the driver shortage is an interesting thing. I think when you look at younger generations, they're not entering into the field of driving, right? It's not something that is a desired career path, I guess, or a glamorous career path when you talk about all the other, whatever they do these days. So for me, the gamification behind it, I think once you get a driver in the door, right, finding the drivers, right, how do you keep them there, right? What's in it? I call it with them. What's in it for the driver, right? How do you make it incentivized for them to keep coming back every day, right? It's not a glamorous profession. How do you make it incentivized? How do you draw that desire in for those drivers to keep coming back every day? We talk about games, and video games is a big part of younger generation culture, right? So how do we gamify the delivery business to get people to come into this profession, right, to work in supply chain? And that's it's passionate for me. I was a gamer when I was younger. So, I think of playing games and those type of things and getting people into this. So, people don't want to be drivers, and that, how do you incentivize them to be a driver? And I think that's where gamification comes in.
Definitely. So before we spoke about some of the technologies that we're using to improve the driver experience, Sarah, I'd love to hear your perspective on the change management piece. How do we make sure those technologies are actually being used by the drivers?
Well, you know, most of the technology implementations that have happened that have not worked out in the history of technology all comes down to change management and adoption, right? You got to get people to be excited. You've got to get people to use the technology. I think just picking up on Scott's point around gamification, so finding ways to make technology engaging and fun, I think is really important. But I also think making the technology seamless. So even if you take an example, you know, let's look at like a robotic process, right? People work alongside robotic processing. So how can you make a step in the process maybe automated through robotic technology, such as if you think about a parcel delivery example, you know, the trucks get built out, let's say in a morning, if that can be automated, helping a driver understand like where different parcels will be placed to enable the journey to be better. I think you will then see excitement from a driver to be able to use maybe a new tablet that can direct how that delivery order needs to be executed during the day. So I think part of it is making sure it's fun. Part of it is making it seamless. So not a, oh, I have to use this, you know, as part of a step in the process. And then I think also is trying to bring benefits to the driver in terms of actually your day is easier because you have this technology. It's not harder because of it.
Definitely. Erik, I'd love to hear your perspective on what Sarah just mentioned.
Yeah, I think the technology is a real powerful tool for us to deliver top-level customer service. Our CSAT scores are industry leading, and our online impressions, you know, the Google and Yelp surveys are at the top. And we're very proud of that. And I think the technology is really the backbone around that. So we asked the question around what does it take for driver adoption, but I think it's the entire team really has to adopt the technology and really believe in it. And so what do we do? Every single month, we do a survey of everyone with an email around what is their feedback on our technology and how do we continue to evolve that? What are the next big things? What can we do to make your job easier, your life better? And then we do roundtables. If we have any outlier groups, we sit down with them after the survey and do a roundtable to kind of understand a little bit better of how can we evolve the technology. I think we've got best-in-class technology, and at the same time, no one's satisfied, that we think we can continue to push that further. The final piece is really around, as we think about the technology and how it evolves, where is it going to be? And that's more probably top-down, trying to take a look out 3 years from now and get people excited about where we're going to go and how does technology enable that.
Definitely. Ashley, how do you kind of think about this challenge?
Yeah, so I agree with what Erik and Sarah said. Like, it has to be seamless for the drivers and the delivery techs for them to utilize it, and has to be really helpful for their job. It can't impede their job. I think something interesting about Sleep Number is we're very innovative in the digital space, mostly to improve your night's sleep, but we're creating smart beds that are sensing and changing to your sleep. And in the same way we approach our innovation internally with our We've developed some software for our drivers for inventory visibility, for returns and reschedules, to allow them to react a little bit faster. And our intention with that technology has really been about how do we help them see things faster, and then how do we build in the machine learning or the AI to actually predictively tell them what's next. So we're essentially applying the same innovation that we apply to our product back into the supply chain space, which is really exciting, and hopefully makes the driver's experience way better.
Definitely. So, I mean, one of the important pieces of this equation is also the returns, the reverse logistics. For many organizations, when I'm purchasing online, it does feel like they've kind of bolted on the returns to their customer experience rather than making it part of the customer experience. Sarah, can you just touch on how you see returns and how you see that feeding into the overall customer experience?
I mean, it's a critical component, and I think my colleagues here will have a lot of good insights in terms of how returns just make the difference overall in terms of the product itself, right? It just can be a game changer. I think from a logistics lens, returns is really important, again, for density. So how returns get managed as a flow back into the network is really important. So it's a density opportunity on the transportation side. But I also think there's a whole untapped capability around the types of services that are going to be required to make returns much more seamless. And I look at, some of the technology out there that can give you instant credit back for a return, accepting it back with even no receipts, which go back into the technology component. Like, how do you tie back a purchase to a person to the purchase from entity? So I definitely think that there's a lot there in terms of technology innovations, but it truly is, I think, a fundamental part of what makes customer experience from a product perspective, and the logistics side of it needs to help make that seamless. But it's really the product companies that I think need to be most concerned and thinking about how to solve for that.
Definitely. Scott, how do you see the returns feeding into the customer experience?
I mean, I think the returns experience has to be an integrated experience. If you have a disconnected returns experience, right, it goes to your brand loyalty, right? If I have trouble returning your product, it's going to go to the way I view your brand. I think, but technology is helping to returns to be a little bit more, friendly to the companies that are producing, right? So you have these agile technologies that allow, if you say, hey, I want to return my pair of shoes, and customers are asking for a survey, right? Has it been worn? Has it not been worn? You start to develop these technologies that say, hey, if it's not worn, it goes to this micro fulfillment. If it is worn, it goes to this micro fulfillment, right? You start to be more agile with where your inventory is moving. And then you start to be able to, recover costs that are associated with transportation movements, those type of things. I think I would agree with Sarah in the fact that, the retailers it's their brand. The logistics is enabling it, but you also have to have a technology, either on the logistics side or the retailer side, to enable this and to be agile when you do it.
Definitely. Asha, I'd love to hear from, I guess, a big and bulky perspective, how you deal with this issue. Yeah, returns are nasty, but we have them and we have to provide them, because it's all about getting our customers the most comfortable sleep experience. And like most bed companies, we have a sleep guarantee. So if you're not happy with your bed, you can send it back, no charge, no hassle. And that experience is really important to us. With the big and bulky though, however, if you have big products coming in, you're taking up space, you're taking up capacity on your trucks and your warehouses, et cetera. So something that we're working on now is, how do we actually leverage those returns to also enhance either our service parts supply chain, and kind of our desire to be less carbon heavy. So what I mean by that is we've had a lot of disruptions due to some material shortages. And if we can recover and reuse and refurbish electronics, any of the components of our bed, that's not only going to help another customer, but it's also going to help our planet. So we're really working hard on this circular return supply chain. I think it's going to be a huge, it kind of already is. You can see a lot of startups in this space and logistics. This is going to be a huge opportunity for the supply chain world, is today and will continue to grow, in my opinion. So I'm excited to see where it goes. Definitely. Erik, I'd love to hear your perspective. Obviously, Ashley mentioned they're focusing on big and bulky. I'd love to hear your kind of more holistic perspective for different industry segments as well.
Yeah, I played in different industries. I'll tell you, returns is the hardest thing we do. It's incredibly complex. And if you're not planning in advance for it, you're likely to fail. It's very difficult. I think everyone agrees with that. In the parcel side for e-commerce, we would see between 10 and 35% returns, which, if you think about that for a second, that means typically in a retailer, one of your largest inbound vendors is returns, right? But just gives you a shocking scale of what that looks like. On the heavy goods piece, there's a lot of components to this. In a lot of cases, there's a return on the product itself. But in many cases, we're taking out old mattresses, we're taking out old appliances. We want to make sure we dispose of those in the best way possible to have the least environmental impact, and make sure that the consumer experience is great, both taking something out that's old and putting something new that they're really excited about. So there's a lot of complexity around that. And there's a lot of piece around visibility back to our customers so they can credit the consumer quickly and understand the disposition of that. I think one of the things we've invested a lot on our returns management software is there's still a lot of opportunity here where first quality returns on heavy goods are moving all the way back to coastal distribution centers versus staying in the market. And obviously that's incredibly inefficient, but it has a huge impact on your carbon footprint, moving product back and forth. And so we're trying to capture as many first quality items in the local hub and keeping them in market. We've also opened up 11 sites across the network that are focused on consolidating inventory, where we can store more first quality product and then get them back into market so they don't go as far. I think this is the real game changer here, is how do we become more efficient with that? And the final piece is, for second quality returns, is there something we can do to repair those in market? If it's a new tablet or a new chip, scratch pedal, can we repair that and not move the whole piece back? Again, just reducing our footprint, and then finally turn that back around. And then for returns that can be taken back to first quality, we made a partnership with a player in the market. They have a marketplace. They can sell returns on their marketplace, and then we can ship them directly out of the hub, again, avoiding movements and avoiding impact on the environment.
Great points there. So just delving a little bit deeper into the carbon footprint, I mentioned there earlier that some of my friends love buying avocados and getting them within 15 minutes, right? I don't think they understand the carbon footprint of that. Just Sarah, just from your perspective, how are you seeing organizations focus on reducing carbon footprint in last mile specifically?
Well, there's a lot of push, I think, to address your friends, right, that don't understand the impact of decisions they make to carbon footprints. So I think the first push is really around getting data to understand what does that mean for me as a consumer and some of the choices that I make around delivery. And I think what we're seeing is that from a logistics last mile delivery perspective, the options are really opening up. Options from time of day delivery, so 7-day-a-week delivery, late evening delivery. I think exposing those options to people actually can drive better results in terms of optimizing trucks, maybe getting them out of heavily congested areas so that they're not sitting idling, waving through traffic, but can take advantage of those lower traffic times. And I think there's also about there's other choices, right? So for example, many of us do get deliveries multiple times a week, setting up individual preferences to say, I don't want a delivery every day. I'll actually take my delivery on a Saturday morning at 4 a.m. for everything that comes in. And that will require some orchestration layers. So we are seeing investments happening in tapping into data that's out there about deliveries to be able to extract different options that help consumers make greener decisions. Because right now people make decisions, to your earlier point about the avocados, they don't understand what that really means. And I think that will be a differentiator, is getting the consumer into that process.
Great points. I think, yeah, it's important to educate the consumer that's being kind of indoctrinated that they want it as quickly as possible, rather than understanding maybe the implications of that. Scott, I'd love to hear how at FarEye you're incorporating that reduction in carbon footprint into the last mile strategies.
Yeah, so we are really we're trying to help companies realize what their impact is, right? So if you run last mile optimization, right, we're helping companies to realize what that impact is, regardless if you're doing pickups or returns, if you're operating miles, understanding that impact, in addition to understanding the network impact, we are also providing, companies with sustainable methods of delivery, right? Whether that be a bicycle or a walker, right? If you want to, put out a sustainable fleet, right? We can help you to, do that, right? I've seen, multiple prototypes around, bicycles with, attached compartments on the front, right? It's changing, slowly. I heard some crazy statistics, right? 10% of all online returns go to, they're either donated or incinerated, right? So, I think when you talk about, just the amount of waste that is being created by returns alone, right? It's equal to a lot of trash, right? We're a very wasteful society, right? That's my own opinion, right? We become more wasteful as we get older, and our society becomes more wasteful. And I think to take a step back and be like, what really understanding what each person's impact is becoming aware, right? I talked about it at the beginning, right? You can't make changes unless you're aware, right? Some people may not even be aware that that avocado that's coming in their door in 15 minutes is a severe impact. And it's not just that one transaction, it's that that society that has been conformed to make those decisions around not caring about, you know, the environment to get something of ease, right? Our society is around ease, right? And I think that was perpetuated by, you know, companies' methods of, you know, free 2-day delivery, you know, free returns, all of these. We've been indoctrinated with these ideas from these retailers that they didn't realize what they were putting in our head, but now we've created these I guess, habits of not caring, right? I want it in 2 days. I want it in 2 hours, right? Thinking about what's behind that other than your own personal satisfaction, right? Thinking of something bigger than yourself in the environment, right? And being able to be aware of that and enable changes are really what it's about.
Definitely appreciate that philosophical approach as well there. Appreciate that. Ashley, obviously you mentioned earlier around kind of the circular economy. I'd love to hear a little bit more around that and how you're approaching this carbon footprint challenge.
Yeah, similar to most companies, we have a commitment to get to carbon neutral, and there's a couple things that we look at in the last mile area that maybe is important to talk about. But obviously, fuel consumption and idling miles and less mileage on the delivery side, as well as that reduction in trash with returns and corrugated and some of the materials that come along with our bed. So we have a few initiatives in place that we're looking at how we can recycle more. Basically, our goal for next year is 0 landfill. And then when we're looking at our last mile delivery miles, what we can't forget is also there are miles that are driven to get that product into the local market. Sometimes we can over optimize for miles in that box truck or that delivery truck. And what I want to encourage other companies to do, and something that we're starting to do, is really look at the mode of transportation to get it into that local market. And is there a balance between those miles and that carbon footprint and the mileage that we're spending in our home delivery truck? So just know that, just like anything, your carbon footprint is a system. And we have to look at optimizing the whole. When we look at, we can't just optimize the delivery portion. We have to look at how we actually get that product there in its entirety. So those are kind of that's the direction that we're headed as an organization, and we're really fired up about it. We're excited about it, and I think it's going to become more and more important as these material shortages and energy crisis and things in our environment that will prevent us from getting that product to the consumer, that we're going to be able to reuse more of what comes back to us.
Great points. Erik, I'd love to hear from your perspective how at XPO you're looking at this carbon footprint issue as well.
This is incredibly important to us. Sustainability has always been, and we put a lot of effort into this. I think to start on the more tactical side, we do dedicated operations out of our customer warehouses, customer markets, and we also have our network, which are our sites that we run for multiple customers. And in both these cases, we're looking at routing efficiency. How do you get the most density with the least number of miles to reduce the carbon emission? The second part is we're one of the leaders in electronic vehicles, EVs, right? Zero emission vehicles. And the goal is for one of our major customers to have all EV fleet in New York City by the end of next year. And we want to continue to roll this out to other metro areas, and we definitely want to get this more into Canada as well, and that's important. And then finally, recycling. Recycling is, core to who we are, what we do. The more we can recycle, the less we can put in landfill. It's a win for everyone. On a more strategic sense, we have the network, and we built the network out with 88 sites. And the reason why is this reduces the number of miles we drive. It puts us within 125 miles of 90% of the population in the US and Canada. And so having this many sites really reduces our impact on the environment by reducing the number of miles we have to drive. And then from a solution set, we're really trying to change the industry here, where we're opening up forward stocking in these 88 locations, in particular around 11 regional markets, where customers can send fast moving SKUs that are unallocated and forward stock them in the market. From a service standpoint, this changes the equation. You're not waiting a week to get a product, you can have it the next day. If the product is already there, I just have to allocate it and set up a delivery schedule. This also allows a couple other things. The ports are busy. And we have a lot of inefficiency at the big ports. By forward stocking, you can take containers directly in through secondary ports into that market. So for instance, rather than going through LA and going to Ontario to unload a container and then shipping it on a truck to Dallas, you can go through the Port of Houston. We'll take an intermodal rate to Dallas, saving costs, saving environmental footprint. It also saves the touch. In the other scenario, you're touching everything in New Jersey or California before it gets to its in-state destination. You don't need to do that. We'll take it right into our market site, unallocated in a container, and then we'll allocate it from there to do the delivery. So that's saving a lot of environmental footprint. And then finally, we want to partner with our customers to get the bigger consolidated truckload to these sites and then across our network. And so the more product we can get onto trucks, leveraging our scale, we think this is going to have a dramatic impact on how much CO2 emissions we're having by not being truckload. And we want to help partner with them to do that.
Great points. I think there's a lot of really great tangible, I guess, advice as well that folks could replicate in their own businesses. Before we wrap up, Sarah, I'd love to just get your opinion on why is it so important for organizations to really focus on reducing their carbon footprint in their last mile? I guess what are the risks of them ignoring it given everything we've discussed today?
Well, I think there's consumer sentiment, right? As more of this becomes visible and visible, customers will start making choices based on their partnerships or investments or where they spend their dollars that align to these strategies. That's one. I think secondly, from a sustainability agenda for last mile, there are going to be bigger regulatory pushes here that will make changes absolutely mandatory. And I think from a global lens, we will see pushes perhaps coming from outside the US market first as being leaders that will drive adoption. But we clearly are seeing changes in the technology as being easier to invest in now. So this, adoption to electric vehicles or looking at new sources of fuel, let's say for the ocean shipping sectors, those are all key requirements, I think, for companies to be able to show that they are moving forward for sustainability, to be able to get investment secured, because that's now looking at for investment funds and hedge funds out there looking to invest. And there's a lot of dollars out there that become part of the portfolio of things that they assess to be able to determine where they put their money. So I think the customers are going to be able to start seeing it and they're going to want it. And then I think from a regulatory push and even the financial investor side, there's just a demand that they're going to have to get there.
Great points. I mean, it'd be interesting to hear how much logistics and supply chains mentioned next week in up the road in Glasgow. See how much of a discussion point that is. I'm sure it'll be a big talking point for all the leaders there. As we wrap up today's conversation, I'd like to go around the virtual room and just ask folks, given what we've discussed today, what excites you about the future of last mile? So we can start with Ashley with that one.
Yeah, I'm excited. We talked a lot about kind of making that experience the best experience for the driver, it ultimately, which will make the best experience for the customer. And I think we'll continue to see innovation and technology that I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see some of the kind of the visibility that we gain from end-to-end supply chain work and how that impacts that last mile and that last kind of touch to the customer before they use our product. So yeah, I think what's so interesting is kind of the supply chain, well, as COVID has put some pressure on this area quite a bit. And I think oftentimes when we have pressure coming at us, the best innovation happens. So I'm excited to see where that takes us.
Thanks for that, Ashley. And same question to you, Sarah. What excites you about the future of last mile?
I think it's the collaboration. I think Ashley used the term earlier about it being a whole system, right? And trying to respond to sustainability. To get last mile right, in order to really put the customer first, in order to appreciate all the different pieces that make it work, collaboration is going to be key. So I think there will be new partnerships coming about, the new technologies that make those partnerships just work better, which is with sharing data, because with sharing data, you actually can act in a more orchestrated way. I think just the demands that exist in this space, we've got to solve for it, and it can't be solved for alone. So I'm really excited about the collaboration opportunity.
Appreciate that, Sarah. And same question to you, Erik. What excites you about the future of last mile?
I love what I do. I think, as we said at the beginning, it's a really exciting time to be part of supply chain. And specifically, I think it's the most exciting time to be part of last mile. The industry stats that we did research on that excite me the most are, this is a $13 billion market. The big and bulky home delivery market is $13 billion today. and that's going to grow to something like $16 billion in the next 3 years. So we're in the middle of that. And the other part is 33% of orders for a big and bulky are placed online today, and that's going to go somewhere 38 to 40% in the next 3 years. And so we really want to position ourselves in partnership with our customers to handle this rapid growth in this market, and as importantly, handle the complexity that's going to come with that, in particular with the increase in online ordering.
Appreciate that, Erik. And last but not least, same question to you, Scott. What excites you about the future of last mile?
Yeah, the future of last mile and all the different technologies and the possibilities that are able to be, realized at this point, right? For me being involved in supply chain for so long, how we've evolved from extremely manual processes to this technology, I guess, infection, and being able to automate processes to create these better possibilities for the end consumer. Technologies, I think Sarah mentioned it earlier, drones, all these different things that are being experimented with in supply chain are going to make everyone's lives better, right? I don't know that there's anyone that's not affected by the supply chain, right? I think everyone, regardless of who you are, right, you're affected by disruptions or whatever it is, and whether you want to think about it that microly or not, right? I used to say to people when I was a truck broker that whatever you have in your house touched the back of a truck at one point, right? It did, right? There's no ifs, ands about it, right? It didn't just, somebody didn't carry it to your house, right? It's the backbone of our society. And when you really think about it, and these technologies that are making their way into supply chain, blockchain is one thing that it really excites me, is that collaboration of data, right? It's going to make everyone's life so much easier when you can realize, right, you start to use a ledger to understand where produce and everything else is. It's a public ledger where everyone has access to data and able to collaborate in one environment. So, I'm excited about the possibilities, more or less, coming from, what we've came from 15, 20 years ago to now is amazing to me. So
appreciate that, Scott. And that brings to an end this incredible webinar. My thanks to all of the speakers for taking out the time of their busy schedules for today's discussion. Hopefully we can get everyone along for another one, maybe in a couple of months or a few years' time, to discuss the evolution and what's changed. Until next time, I hope to see you on another Reuters Events webinar really, really soon.